I'll hand it over to Eric to tell us exactly what that is.
Okay. And just so everybody's aware, I have kicked off the recording for the meeting. And we will post that as well as use that for our minutes. Not that Ariel needs any assistance whatsoever. So with that, call to order. Our next item on the agenda is public comment. Hearing none, speak now or hold your peace till next meeting. We can move on to meeting minutes from our last meeting, which was January the 11th, I believe.
Well, so do we have a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved, Binu.
And a second?
I'll second, Adrian.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to approve the minutes. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
I'll actually abstain, John, as I hadn't read them.
Yeah, I'm gonna abstain because I don't think I was at the meeting actually. So, but with that, the motion passes. And what do we have next?
So next, we're coming up on the fiscal year 2024 comprehensive plan and budget and targets.
Okay.
So I'm going to walk through kind of our approach to the budget this year. We typically do things pretty much the same over the past couple of years, but building off of the previous year's experience, we're going to tweak things a little bit. So today I'm going to go through, typically we have 3 meetings. And in the past, we've had the first meeting to talk about program targets and revenues, the second meeting, expenses and investment and staffing, and then the final meeting to look at a consolidated budget. We're going to try to get this accomplished with 2 meetings, even though we have 3 scheduled. I realize how much of your time this is taking up, and I want to eat into it as little as possible. So I'm going to try to get everything accomplished and get to a resolution recommending the budget and targets at the end of our next meeting on June 7th. If we don't get there, we do have a meeting scheduled for the 14th. And we can regroup at that point. What's happened over the past couple of years is I've intruded on your calendars too much. We haven't maintained a quorum at that last meeting. So we haven't necessarily had that full recommendation, although we've had your support at the board meeting. So I'm going to just formalize it a little bit more.
So I think that what you're saying is that in exchange for your consideration of our time, that you're asking that we make an effort to make sure that we're at the next meeting and have a quorum so that we can get through the recommendations.
That would be great. Also not on this list, there are going to be 2 other additional items at the next meeting that I'd like the committee to be there for. And I'd like your counsel as part of that meeting on both of those items. One's a matter we can discuss later on, and the other one is related to just our overall operating procedure as we are reviewing how we monetize environmental attributes. So, so any questions on schedule, or I'll plow ahead. Cool. So kind of where are we today in terms of impact to the Green Bank? So in our first 11 years, we have completed or closed 59,000 projects. We had a target of 60,000. So we're coming pretty close up to what we said we were going to do. We've deployed $2.2 billion. We had a target of 2.28. So I think we're fairly close there. Capacity, we have installed 508 megawatts out of a target of 550. So really great achievements, that really great achievement there. In terms of carbon that we've avoided from all these projects in the first 10 years, we have avoided over 10 million tons of carbon to be emitted into the atmosphere, which is fantastic. Looking at our most recent fiscal year and then looking at where we are year to date with 2023, I just wanted to put this up there to kind of ground us as we're going into looking at programs. So for FY23, we completed about 3,300 projects. We deployed $115 million in capital to the green economy here in Connecticut. We installed 21 megawatts of clean energy capacity and avoided 524,000 tons of CO2. FY23 to date, our numbers are lower, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. That's just reflective of where we are. To date, we have completed 1,800 projects. That's out of a target of just over 2,000. We've deployed $113 million out of a target of 160. And we've installed 44 megawatts of capacity out of a target of 57. And these projects are going to avoid 145,000 tons of CO2. And the decreased targets, I mean, the big difference between FY22 and FY23 is we have no more RSIP. So RSIP was always the big one for capacity, the big one for project numbers. So this is, when I said it's reflective of where we are, it's really reflective of the fact that RSIP has graduated and is no longer in our numbers.
Eric, what's the total a ballpark figure on the total amount of megawatts of electric power that the state uses?
I'm not entirely sure off the top of my head.
Somewhere in the 6,000 megawatt range. Is that right? Does that sound right?
In terms of consumption, it's about 25,000 gigawatt hours.
Oh.
In terms of like capacity, like peak capacity, I don't know what it is anymore. 5,000-6,000 megawatts. We've helped deploy about 550 megawatts, 10% of peak. Rough numbers.
Mm-hmm.
I think when we looked at the numbers from the evaluation of the RSIP as an example, when that Dan presented it, I think the RSIP has helped reduce demand by almost 2%, which is a good number. That's a significant number.
So in terms of this, what are the state's goals? Like, we have goals for 2050 or something. Where are we supposed to be at?
So on the greenhouse gas emission target, so we have no less than 80% reduction of 2001 levels by 2050. As we're talking here, maybe I'll chat through. Deep did an excellent presentation on the updated greenhouse gas inventory.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
The state met its 2020 target, which was 10% below 1990 levels by 2020. It met it, but there's some really interesting production versus consumption-based accounting, meaning in a production-based accounting scheme, all the natural gas-fired facilities in Connecticut that have been built as a result of kind of the regional ISO issues, Connecticut counts in its emissions. But in the consumption-based accounting methodology, where we have all the environmental attributes from Dominion, the nuclear facility, and where our renewables are creating zero carbon resources in the New England region, we reduce a lot more emissions. So I'll chat through that. It's a really interesting report there's a good executive summary in there.
And And the last question, I guess, is how are we doing in comparison to at least our neighboring states?
Per capita, we have the highest deployment in New England of
Of
residential,
renewables?
residential solar specifically. Um, renewables on a whole, I'm not entirely sure. I can put that as a takeaway and follow up with you on it.
Well, I mean, I'm just interested in where we're at in saving the planet.
Working on it. Working on it.
Yeah.
That small little detail, saving the planet.
Yeah.
I would say like broadly, Connecticut, we're a small sliver of the national scheme. We're making progress on our own greenhouse gas emission reduction targets. In the whole scheme of things, that's very small. But in the context of what we're doing in terms of demonstrating how government can get more out of public funds, we're having a very big impact nationally because others are picking it up. And as a result, the $27 billion greenhouse gas reduction fund was created. So we're demonstrating models that are replicable that other cities, states, and countries are picking up. So I think that's where we pick up our game. We're, as I'm often out there saying, we're the state with the first constitution. We had the constitution 150 years before our national government is. So, we're used to leading in certain ways. But we're making progress in Connecticut on our own targets, and we're helping others achieve theirs. I chatted
Yeah.
through the greenhouse gas inventory.
Yeah, no, I think that that's right, that we may be a small state, but we can be an example. And and I'm hoping that we're as aggressive as possible as we can be in that regard. I know there's people that say, well, isn't it good enough for us to be in the middle of the pack? But I don't think that's I don't agree with that, and I don't think the Green Bank that's the approach of the institution. So
It's
anyway,
not.
sorry.
No worries. So with the foundation set, let's talk about what we're proposing for next fiscal year. So we're proposing that the organization as a whole will do no fewer than 1,726 projects for $147 million in capital deployed and an installed capacity no less than 60 megawatts. With majority of the project numbers and capacity coming from the incentive programs, and the balance coming from our financing programs. I'll talk about what makes up each of these separately. We aren't doing anything in terms of targets for environmental infrastructure, as we want Lee to get settled in, and we need to develop some programs for which we need targets. So this time next year, I expect to be having a more in-depth conversation from an environmental infrastructure perspective. So these targets, the 1,700 projects for the year. I mean, you saw me just talk about how we were doing 3,300 2 years ago. This is reflective of having smaller targets for SBEA and no more ARSA. We also have smaller capacity targets. We stopped doing capacity targets on much of, or at least on CPACE. While we will have solar that's deployed there, the split of projects between efficiency and solar is not always that predictable. So in having the target around capacity forces us to, or could force us to ignore the energy efficiency projects in favor of the solar, and we don't want to prioritize one versus the other, especially as energy efficiency is, I think, oftentimes more challenging. So we aren't producing those targets, but we are still deploying in that area. So moving first to the financing programs. What are we doing in these programs? CPACE, we're looking at a target that's about flat year on year. We are expecting a bit of an economic downturn in some, as many in the financial services sector are saying. This recession that keeps not happening, we're building in some expectations that there is a decrease in economic activity. The impact of that, we expect our CPACE numbers to continue to be robust. The third party CPACE is where we're expecting that to really be hit. It's those projects in recent years have skewed to be new construction, and new construction would be something that's much more likely to be stalled or foregone if there is an economic downturn. So our numbers are reflective of that. We have our PPA and roof lease product. That's a slight increase year on year, up to 16 projects. That's reflective of our existing pipeline of the state and uni projects. Then SBEA, the utilities are forecasting a decent decline in numbers there, and that they expect to be economically driven. We got that number fairly late from the utilities last week. I know Mackie has some questions on it, so I may be able to speak a little bit more in detail at our next meeting about that decrease there. But this number does pretty much come from the utilities. They're the ones that are responsible for customer acquisition. And so this is the number that they're expecting to acquire next year. And then on multifamily, we're expecting to do 3 projects for $300,000 and about a third of a megawatt of capacity. We expect these all to be PPAs that are currently under review or in the works in the affordable multifamily space with housing authorities in the state, taking advantage of the new RRES structure that will allow affordable multifamily to get advantageous rates through the tariffs. Questions? All right. The incentive business.
What about that chart also included transportation?
So yes. So there are 2 items. There are 2 items on here that we haven't completed. The transportation is on here. This is a relic of how I did things a couple years ago. Let me come back to transportation in 1 second. I have not completed the strategic investments yet. This is typically where Bert says, hey, I have X number of things in the works. Let's go ahead and put it in our targets. He and I are still connecting on what those numbers should be. So that will get updated ahead of the next meeting. Mm-hmm. Transportation is a line that I added in here so that we could also incorporate the carbon savings that the organization has achieved through our electric vehicle carbon credit program. We did this a couple of years ago when we first filed for, or I'm sorry, we were preparing to file for those carbon credits with the carbon registry back in early 2021, I believe. That's when we added that in. As we've seen, it takes a long time for those registries to issue those credits. We actually just got the first round of credits issued earlier this year, as you may remember. We're currently working on the next round and doing that filing. I haven't included any thing in here on those targets. But I will say we're expecting to mint about 150,000, between 100 and 150,000 carbon credits of that charging activity next year. And I have used those numbers in our revenue that you'll see in the budget.
Eric,
So
what does the term mint mean?
So mint means they actually create the credit. So we and our consortium developed a methodology with the verified carbon standard, the Vera registry. And using that methodology, we create the carbon credits. And so when I say we go to mint them, we say, hey, here are all the chargers that we have qualified in as being part of our project. Here's the activity from all of our chargers. Here are all the checks that have been done. We then hire a third-party auditor who goes, yep, the Green Bank did this right, or, well, the Green Bank did this right, except for X, Y, and Z, and we're recommending these changes. The registry reviews it, they go through their process, and they say, okay, we're going to actually give you 150,000 credits or 10,000 credits or whatever that number is. And then we go on our merry way. But
And then where do heat pumps come in?
so there could be some heat pumps that are funded by CPACE in some of the energy efficiency building retrofits, but most of that work is going to be done through Smarty on the incentive program, which is the perfect transition.
Well,
So
what about, and let me ask just one other thing is, in along with that is the batteries. Oh, I see it. Okay.
right
I
here.
missed that. Thanks.
So
Thanks.
I'll start with Smarty. We are recommending an increase in targets in Smarty. We're actually increasing our non-solar projects to be to increase by 20% year on year, and we're expecting that to be driven by the heat pump incentives that are out in the market and us to provide basically gap financing. We have the solar and Smarty we're keeping. I expect that will grow. We are making some slight tweaks to how we pay contractors there. I won't bore you with the details, but I think that will close some of the gaps that have hampered Smarty and solar in recent years. So I do expect a lift in that. I don't know how much of a lift we'll get in the solar space. So we're just forecasting an increase in non-solar. Also, not included in this number because the board hasn't approved it, but we expect to be bringing to market new measures for Smarty in the environmental infrastructure space. So those should be coming to deployment, the deployment committee fairly soon. And those measures are primarily focused around water, some waste, and I think there was a tree measure. I don't know if that made the final list, but it was near final. It was really high on the top of the list about a month ago. So on the battery side, we're looking to approve 279 projects for $81 million. This is where the vast majority of our capacity we're expecting to come from. The majority of these in terms of capacity and capital are going to be on the C&I side. In terms of number of projects, it's going to be on the residential side. We are still seeing increased demand on the C&I side, and we are still working to improve demand on the residential side. We had I'd say a productive meeting this morning with our partners at the utilities and with our distributed energy resource management provider, Energy Hub, this morning on just some overall barriers that we're seeing in the market. And I think that some of those are things that we can address in the short term, and some of those are going to take longer term consideration. But we are working on juicing that demand on the residential side. Adrian, you have a question? Oops, you're on mute. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay. I just wanted to ask you in both the Smarty and battery storage categories, is there a possibility to break those down a little bit? Because for battery storage, the average investment is going to be like $292,000. So I don't get it, because I think we're trying to push battery storage at the individual home level. So how many of those are targeted, and how many industrial applications are targeted?
So yes, so we're expecting 29 C&I battery storage installations and 250 residential.
Okay. And the residential, are we still around 15K per unit?
I wish.
Twice that.
Yeah.
Twice that. Wow.
No.
Okay.
Inflation, battery costs have really gone through the roof, causing us to scratch our heads and figure out how to make this happen. The other, there's a lot going on in battery storage. I feel like we're going to learn a lot. There's a lot of things that we have to do, but I feel like we're going to learn a lot from our colleagues, ironically, in Puerto Rico. Sergio and I have good relationships with their solar and storage industry down there. They have 100% of solar installations have battery storage in Puerto Rico, and
Wow.
I was talking to their Solar Connecticut equivalent recently, and he said, "Brian, have a hurricane. It'll show you why storage is important." And I said, "No, thank you."
Yeah.
But I also suspect that their installed costs are a lot lower than Connecticut. We're in the early stages of the maturation part of the curve, so it probably costs more for our contractors to do it, and customers aren't demanding it. So we're trying to figure out all the different drivers, what's going to move the market. We are hearing some initial indications from the Solarize campaigns that Smart Power and Yale are doing, that's starting to lift in communities, just people talking to each other. But we're in the real early stages. It's like the solar market in Connecticut in 2010 is kind of like where we are with battery storage. It just plugs along.
Are we still offering $7,500 in terms of the incentive? Because that was the idea. There was that we were financing half of it. So it's not, now it's only a quarter.
That's right. And then now the 30% ITC now applies to the battery too. So you've got that. You've got up to the 7,500, and then you've got the 10 years of performance-based incentives. If I had to guess, it probably is leaving anywhere between 25 to 50% of the installed cost of the system still left uneconomic, which means that the homeowner would have to value that from a resiliency perspective and say it's worth it. And I don't think they're seeing it yet.
Yeah. Okay. Same thing for Smarty. What's the split there? Is that all going to be residential?
Smarty by definition is all residential.
Okay.
So we're expecting we're expecting of that 944 projects, about 864 to be energy efficiency, so home HVAC primarily. There's other measures that qualify, but majority of them are HVAC related or insulation or something related to the thermal envelope. We're expecting 68 to be solar and 12 to be battery. And we expect the 12 battery to also have a solar component potentially. So.
Thank you.
If I could,
oh no, go ahead.
Go
Well,
ahead, John.
let's just throw in a quick question: is there are there battery storage being installed on multifamily units,
Great.
or is it single family?
That's where I was going to go, John. So
Okay.
I feel like there's a connection between our energy storage solutions residential here and our solar PPA on the slide before. So, Banu, you're going to get a little bit of this when we catch up with you on the zero emission technologies. But we've been working really hard underneath Public Act 2148, which allowed for affordable housing to be treated as residential in the RES program, the Residential Renewable Energy Solutions Program. So that happened in June of 2021. Then in 2022, PURA had a docket. The docket involved the Green Bank, Department of Housing, Connecticut Housing Finance Authority, DEEP, and the HUD, federal HUD, as key implementers there of advising PURA. PURA made a decision that, created a couple of tiers for what affordable housing would be defined as, including if you participated in any programs of the housing agencies, you were on a list. So there's 1,300 affordable housing units in Connecticut that represent 80,000 of, I think, 120,000 that are affordable housing. So 2/3 of them that are deemed affordable, which means they'll now be treated as residential underneath the RES, which means they'll be getting the high tariff, 32 cents per kilowatt hour for 20 years. And in that decision, PURA also said, whatever we decide here will transfer over to the energy storage solutions. So we're now working with our interagency partners to go at that, look at that 1,300 list, put our federal Inflation Reduction Act caps on where there are all these additional adders, for energy communities, for low income housing, for domestic content, and trying to figure out where we can target to start getting some finally solar deployment on affordable housing. But so that would be through our PPA, but then we'd also offer the property owner backup storage for those participants as well. So I think that's where we're going to get the lift in the residential storage targets, is through affordable housing, which is really the market that really needs it the most. So fingers crossed, John, we could demonstrate. I know Mackey's working hard with Sergio here. We might have a transaction in June that demonstrates this. And once we demonstrate it, hopefully we'll be able to start unlocking it, across the state. But that's a big market that we think the regulatory policy structure is finally open to make happen.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my only comment would be is that, as with everything else that the Green Bank does, the simplicity of design is, like, I think, so important, because these are, if once it gets even like 1 or 2 levels of complexity up from real simple, you just lose people. And I mean, so whoever we have this, I mean, and that comes down to both program design and communications, I guess. So hopefully that's kept in mind.
And we know, like, affordable housing is the hardest of the hard markets. It's the hardest. Right now, the program would work for individually metered units. So if you're an affordable housing unit that has 100 units, 100 tenants, different tenants, each individually metered, then what could happen in this program is there could be on that tenant bill an additional credit for solar that's been deployed, in the parking lot of the affordable housing. So you're effectively taking their energy bill. Let's assume they're paying 35 cents today, which is what they're paying given the standard offer. And they get a 6-cent credit. So they would drop to 29 cents per kilowatt hour. So think of us as adding more to their bill, and HUD is willing to do that now, which they weren't willing to do several years ago. So it is hard, it's complicated. If we could simplify it, we'll get to scale. And that's individually metered. Master metered is a whole other complication. But
Yeah.
the teams are working hard to chip away at the regs.
Cool. Any other questions on these targets or others before?
Eric, I think there was a question from Brenda. Would be great to know the health impacts of that. I think in the data, is this data shared with Department of Public Health for them to interpret the health impact that is?
So, Pierre Solar. Let me take a look at that. In terms of our estimates of health impacts, I can easily put something together on this. We can forecast the expected environmental impacts and then the correlated health impacts that feed off of that improved air quality. So I'm happy to put something together based off of these for the committee. The initial numbers, which do need some tweaking because they don't include all of the benefits of the storage. I actually do not. Well, yeah, I don't have the public health impacts in the spreadsheet, but I can put it together and give something to you guys.
Thanks, Eric.
I sent your other question, Brenda, to Sergio.
Oh, excellent. Thank you. I heard that from someone last fall, and I've been meaning to get around to trying to dig into it. Haven't done that yet, but that might assist us with our battery storage program here.
Yeah.
Adrian, to your question on will we meet targets by the end of this fiscal year, I think that depends. We will not, most likely, on storage on the residential side. Smarty, we should hit those targets any day now, if we haven't already. On CPACE, we're approaching those targets, and the PPA, I think we're going to come very close. So, overall, I'm very optimistic. I think the organization is going to have a great year. I think storage, just due to those overall price increases for the technology, has slowed that deployment. So.
Thanks, Sergio.
So let me talk through. No problem. I answered many names. Let me talk through key points on revenue. So how are we going to pay for all of this? So utility customer assessment. So basically the 1 mil surcharge. We're forecasting with utilities a 2% decrease. That's kind of in line with what we've seen. It's a little bit more than what we've seen year on year lately. They're saying at 2%. I think the utilities are they're a little bit more doom and gloom on economic activity than others. So that's kind of what's driving that to be closer to 2% than the 1% that we've seen more recently. But we do expect that to decrease every year. So the more that we do our job, the more that that should decrease ideally. Regi auction proceeds, we're forecasting 5.2 million. That's in line with the new statutory cap that has been put in place. So while we do expect auction proceeds to surpass that $5.2 million number, anything above that will go to the state to fund cheaper the electric car rebate program. Interest income, we're forecasting a 28% increase year on year. It's due to increased loan volumes this year. So we're having more interest income, which means we're getting more money out the door. Grant income, we have a small number of grants that we expect to receive next year. This is not including anything from the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. Should we receive any money through that from the EPA, we'll update our budget at that time. Rec sales, I want to highlight the team's been doing a great job in terms of marketing and monetizing those assets. The present market price has been going up. We've locked in buyers. Our weighted average price for recs right now is $31.73. Last year, of the RECs that we had to deliver, we had locked in at about just over $30. Prices are continuing to go up, and I know that we are in the process of settling a trade or finalizing a trade to lock in at current prices for next year. So positive news there. Our Shrek sales, we have a slight year-on-year decrease in forecast income, and that's in line with what our longer-term expectations are, and that's just due to the general degradation of systems each year. The system will produce less than the previous year, assuming similar conditions, and that's wear and tear, for lack of a better word. We have an increase in LREC, ZREC income, and that's just really bringing in line our forecast with what we've seen. So other income, this bucket includes just other smaller streams of income across the organization. So forward capacity market sales, the electric vehicle, carbon credits that John mentioned earlier. So with that, I'd like to transition to the staffing plan. Any questions on revenues before I move on?
Yeah. What about the Biden money? Where does that come in?
So, in my mind, the Biden money is going to take two forms. The first being the greenhouse gas reduction. Well, I'll make that the second. The first is going to be in incentives and rebates, as I hear them referred to most often, and those are really going to flow through DEEP, not through us. So there will be rebates out there that you can get if you put in a heat pump. There's other money that's going to flow through what's in the Inflation Reduction Act termed the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, which is what was initially meant to seed a national green bank. EPA is just released guidance that this award will be split into three parts. There's a Solar for All initiative. There's a National Clean Investment Fund, and I'm going to screw up the acronym. It's a CCIA, Clean Communities, and the IA, I can't remember.
Investment Accelerator.
Investment Accelerator. Thank you, BG. And the largest portion of this is the National Green Investment Fund, and that's really meant to act to seed other organizations to lend to projects, kind of to act like a couple national scale green banks lending to other green banks. So that we expect money to flow through that to us. We are presently working on doing some pre-work on applications. They haven't issued the notice of funding yet, but we expect that to come out later this summer. We'll be part of an application there. In terms of the Clean Communities Investment Accelerator, that's more of a grant funding to kind of seed and help support the non-investment or support the investment activity, but kind of the overhead of organizations doing this. We expect to participate in an application for that money as well. And then on the Solar for All, we're currently coordinating with DEEP, PURA, and other agencies to make sure that Connecticut gets at least its fair share of funds. That's kind of our philosophy across the board. But we are currently working on that with those organizations, and we expect funding to flow from that once the actual funding opportunities come out. I think funding will probably be awarded towards the end of this calendar year or beginning of next calendar year. We haven't included anything in the budget because it doesn't seem right to include that without at least the NOFO being issued, the Notice of Funding Opportunity, and us having submitted an application. And also don't want to count our chickens before they're hatched. So.
And what's the kind of the magnitude of the funds that we're looking for, at least? I mean, we're talking about, is it more like 2 million, 20 million, 200 million? 2 billion, you know, where,
Each of the
what,
pot, each pot of money is different. So the easiest one is the CCIA, the Clean Communities Investment Accelerator. That there's a standard award of, the way that I understand it, it's kind of a binary situation. You're either approved or you're not. If you're approved, you get $5 million. The Solar for All is going to be awarded based on an allocation formula that's used. I believe it's the same formula that's used on the clean water funds.
It's not an allocation formula
No.
yet. That's what we're trying to advocate for.
Here I am counting my chickens before they're hatched. But it,
Yeah, but that one's a competitive grant. It's called the BO&C $7 billion. There'll be up to 60 recipients. The EPA will invite notices of intent from the 50 states, the territories of DC and Puerto Rico and other territories, and will fund up to 3 tribal applications. So that's a signal the EPA is sending that it's likely that they're going to allocate to states. In our comments that we're submitting this Friday, we're asking for additional clarification, because states, when they submit their notices of intent, when we submit ours for affordable housing, as an example, we could use a lot more than our fair share. So if they don't define what the share is, then we'll ask for more than our fair share, which the fair share has been defined prior to Eric's point in terms of how the EPA dealt with the clean water state revolving funds. And the EPA issued Connecticut 1.19% of those funds. So 1.19% of 7 billion is 84 million, to give you a sense, John, of the fair share.
and I guess, and you talked about tribal applications. Are the you know, the tribes within Connecticut, are they doing anything, going after any of this money?
I suspect they will go. I suspect there's a tribal association that's bringing in tribes.
there is. I don't know if Connecticut's part of it. There's a group, the Intertribal Trade Council, is looking to get together a group of the tribes to partner to either directly go after this money or as part of the BO&C 7, but also work with other organizations in the other pots of money.
Well, could we play any role in assisting or encouraging them?
So the Connecticut tribes, I defer to you, BG, on how we would engage with them. I can speak to the overall Intertribal Trade Council. I've met with them a couple times on guidance, and I know they have some strong backing from the DOE that's really working to help get them what they need to get a successful application, something built there to get this money deployed on tribal land. I'm just not sure of the Connecticut tribes' engagement with that.
I chatted through the disadvantaged communities locator for the Department of Energy map. If you go into Connecticut, you'll actually see the tribes in Connecticut along with the low-income communities that have been identified as disadvantaged. I've reached out to the environmental health and safety director of the Mohegan tribe as an example. We used to work, our predecessor, the Clean Energy Fund, used to work really closely with the Mohegan tribes. One of our fuel cells went into the Mohegan casino. Her response was that the Mohegan tribe has very limited housing. They do have a senior assisted living center, which is interesting, you know, especially from the perspective of the residential incentive that I was talking about before. So we're connected, John. I feel like whatever Connecticut does, whatever we do, we'll always include them. The question is nationally, who's going to lift up the other tribes? We had this discussion with the Secretary of Energy 2 weeks ago, specifically on tribes. How can we enable more deployment in the 574 individually recognized sovereign nations?
Right.
So it's a complicated challenge for DOE.
But they also, besides whatever limited residential housing, they have, the big infrastructure of, I don't know what you call it, entertainment or whatever, and which uses a lot of power. And it seems to me, it just seems to me like that it gives us another bite of the apple because they exist within Connecticut. They're, so if there's another way to get funds through that avenue to help reduce carbon, that would be great.
That's a good point. Eric, let's flag it in our weekly, just as once the EPA releases, we can put them in our outreach to be more direct.
I'm just making a note.
I just took a quick look at the Mohegan tribe. They're in the Norwich Public Utility, the municipal territory, which whatever is fine. We could still work with them. But yeah, they're in Norwich.
Huh.
But the Mashantucket Pequots are in Ledyard, which I think is Eversource territory. So they would apply to the residential solar there. Norwich, they wouldn't. Just some subtle little distinctions. Then there's a little
Right.
called the Shagatoki in the western part of the state above New Milford.
Really?
That's Scattercook.
Is that Scattercook? There you go.
It's,
That's it.
I have an uncle who's in that tribe.
There you go, Scattercook.
Wow. Thank you.
So to answer your underlying question, John, we fully expect to receive some money, and we should we'll adjust the budget when that becomes clearer on the amount when. So, but the January of the BO&C is when I would expect us to be coming back to you with an update on that. Obviously, you'll hear about any awards well before that, but in a formal sense.
Well, I think that it works out well in that we look at our own revenues, our own expenditures, our own targets, and then the federal money comes in. That's like on top of that, rather than saying, okay, the federal money will take give us relief on what we're already doing, because we want to maximize expenditures and impact, and that's the way to do it.
We want it to be additive, not instead of.
Yeah,
Right.
there are formula grants that are allocated to states that Eric was speaking to, that DEEP is receiving as the state's energy office. And then there are competitive grants, and those are all race to the top, best win. So we're going after those. And the other thing, just a comment, stay tuned. We're working with DEEP on a DOE formula grant for energy efficiency revolving loan funds. Details to come, but it's good. The DEEP team working with our Smarty loan financing team, trying to work out some details. Good stuff.
All right. So with that, I'm going to move to our staffing plan for next year. So, as you saw in the budget that was mailed, we have 38 employees that are moving over effectively in the same position year to year. No changes with them. We have an additional 9 employees that we hired this fiscal year. We currently have 12 vacancies, which it's a little bit misleading, I realize, as I put this in here. It's of those 12 vacancies, some are for positions that were created earlier this year or are presently open. So that's 7 of those, and then 5 are additional positions that we're asking for. So of these 12 vacancies, let me just walk through what we have vacant in case you know of anybody that's looking. We all know this is a tight hiring environment. We just hired our director of environmental infrastructure, but she's not joining us until September on a full-time basis. We have backfill positions on one backfill position on battery storage. We have an open position on our investment team for a lead underwriter. And we're going to need a backfill on asset management as we're moving some staff around. We still have some openings that this committee and the board approved as part of our Dream Big pitch, are gearing up. So we're still filling those. We have somebody who we're close to hiring for 2 of those positions, an admin on our financing programs team, and then a manager for market data analytics. And then in terms of new positions, we have a couple. We have an additional position on battery storage to help with the growth there and really help us kind of augment our marketing and augment our outreach. We are looking for an additional person on our investment team to support activity that's coming through. We've done just a huge number of deals this year, as you guys have seen at the board meetings. We're expecting that to continue. So we're asking for an additional staff person there to support that and whatever comes through on environmental infrastructure. I'm proposing an additional headcount to support our work in electric vehicle carbon credits and help us with the monetization of environmental attributes. We're still working on the details of that position, but wanted to get it budgeted. And then we are proposing a 5% cost of living allowance, as well as a 5% merit pool, with staff being able to earn up to an 8% increase, and a 1.5% promotion pool. And we're, as we do every year, we're increasing our ranges, our salary bands, which is what was previously been approved by BO&C in the board. We're doing that in line with wage inflation from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And the next item that we have on the agenda is actually more in depth on compensation, but this kind of transitions nicely to that. But that might answer some of your questions about merit process. But any questions on staffing? Okay, with that, we'll move to the next agenda item, which is just overall on compensation. So as you hopefully remember, at our last meeting, I had our HR consultant, Kelly McDaniel from the DeLisa Group, joined us to kind of walk us through just kind of an overview of what we were doing on compensation. We did a compensation study. We did an RFP in 2021. We selected Cardis Larson, who had done the previous study in 2016. Basically, they use market data to price 48 positions on our team. And overall, they found that we were paying about 97% of the market price for or market rate for those positions. with our goal to have compensation that's externally competitive and internally equitable, we're going to look to refresh the study in 2024. And that's a recommendation from our overall HR consultant, Kelly. For basically, due to inflation, we want to make sure that we do this a little bit sooner rather than later. Instead of waiting the full 5 years, we'll do it about 3 years out. In this benchmarking exercise, the Cardis Larson did make some recommendations about changing our overall compensation bands. So that's kind of if you're at the vice president range, you're making between X number and Y number. If you're in the director range, you're making between A and B. Ultimately, the recommendations that they made the structure harder to manage in one respect, and we couldn't really justify from a career progression perspective. So we had people at various positions were no longer, it wasn't like all the directors were in one band, they were spread across different bands. It really made things kind of unwieldy, and would be very hard to explain to staff. So we ultimately our goal is to not to act on that and implement that. Being that we're fine structurally, our pricing is right, and the dollar amounts and the ranges were found to be in line. So, kind of moving onto merit. And one of the things that came out of an employee survey that we did about a year ago was staff really wanted more transparency around goals, targets, and ultimately their merit compensation increases. And while in our minds, yeah, everything's linked, it wasn't a very go from A to B to C type of a situation. And so we've taken a step back, looked at things, and figured out how could we be more transparent in this. And we've developed an approach that really focuses on 3 areas of influence on merit, which is organizational performance, product and program performance, and individual performance, including the 360 review. Our goal is to be as quantifiable as possible. Quantitative as possible, and link back to actual numbers and performance on targets where we can. And so we've developed a scoring sheet that I can just walk you through, kind of an example, and I'd love to get some feedback on this and the overall approach, as we really want merit compensation to be incentivizing, and really want it to be a way that we can award good performance. So if you can see my slide, this is an example score sheet, and we have overall organizational goals, and these are the organization's targets for this fiscal year in terms of investment, in terms of number of projects, in terms of capacity installed. These are all weighted. They make up a third of the overall organizational goal. I have some dummy scores in here, basically just to make sure my Excel worked. We have the next goal from an organizational perspective is to strengthen Connecticut's vulnerable communities, and making sure that we have for no less than 40% of investment and benefits directed there. And the third is making sure that we are keeping an eye towards organizational sustainability, so making sure that we're getting our capital deployed. So we have a target here about how much of green bank capital, as opposed to just overall capital, gets deployed. And then obviously managing defaults and losses and so on and so forth. And then in terms of how do we actually score these, we have some ranges that, hey, if looking at the first goal, assuming that we get 90 to 100% of the target, that would be a 3 out of a 5. If we get 100 to 110%, that's a 4. If we get above 110%, that's really knocking the ball out of the park. That's worth the 5 there. Looking at the vulnerable communities, we're looking at an average percentage of projects from an investment perspective that are actually in vulnerable communities, and an average of the prior 2 years. And so if we're hitting that 40%, that's really a 3. You're meeting those expectations. If you're getting above that 40 to 50%, let's say, that's really that's worth your 4. If you're knocking the ball out of the park, you're getting above 50%, that's worth your 5 in that category. And so we're looking to develop kind of these ways to score each of these metrics on here.
Hey, Eric,
Yes.
can I just add on this? So this is the organization goals built around our comprehensive plan. So goal 1, 2, and 3 in that left column are the 3 goals that are outlined in our comprehensive plan. And in goal 1, the white areas there is essentially what Eric went through before with the tables. We did that last year. So these are just those table numbers rolled up. You can see in terms of the weight that what we're trying to communicate, what I'm trying to communicate based on the board's desires, is that what's really important here is, yes, all those targets, but more importantly, making sure that no less than 40% of the investment and benefits is going to vulnerable communities. It's the highest weighted organizational goal. Whatever happens in this third part of the merit organization, everyone gets this score. And in the organization, no one gets anything different. We're all in on this, the comp plan as the organization. We've got, Eric's done great dashboards and stuff to track this progress over time. On the vulnerable communities, we are, you might recall that is a by 2025, no less than, we're at 43% so far this year. So we're actually beating it, but the goal is to keep accelerating more investment there. Just to give some more on the organization. It's very comp plan linked as opposed to the next one, Eric. Sorry, just wanted to give some of that.
Thanks, Brian. So the next one is linked to the specific project, specific products and programs that we run. And this is linked back to employees based off of what they're working on. So this is dummied up for somebody who's supporting CPACE and other programs in our financing programs area, and this is weighted by the amount kind of our budget allocations. But we also have measures of success based off of those programs targets in terms of investment, projects closed, and capacity installed. We also have a goal in here for making sure that we're getting that green bank capital deployed and invested, so that that's generating interest, hitting those target returns and durations.
Can I add a little more on this one too?
Certainly.
So this example that Eric provided is financing programs. So this is Mackie, right? Mackie is our leader of financing programs. So, there's the scoring there for all of, Mackie's chart. That would be in one of those charts that Eric presented. That is 50% of the merit. And then the other 50% is how much green bank capital is going, the use of our cash that comes from ratepayers, RGGI, interest income, are being invested in projects that generate interest income and build our balance sheet. That's the other 50% because we're trying to work towards sustainability. So this is really Mackie's goal, which he could then modify with his team to prioritize what they're working on. So he may say for somebody on his team under CPACE, I'm going to score you all for CPACE. You have nothing related to multifamily. You're all CPACE. So this is my push down to the senior team in terms of how they're scored at a senior level, but they can change it to their subordinates how they need based on their roles and responsibilities.
Cool. Thanks, PG. And then onto the individual performance. So we have included here our business competencies, which are part of our 360 review. And those have been pretty standard, although we've made some edits this year. We're looking at commitment to the organization, communication skills, experience, knowledge, and skills, problem solving, customer service. For managers, we're looking at leadership, supervisory skills, and then the new one that we're adding in, kind of as a result of some of the DEI work that we've been doing, is their creation of the sense of belonging to the organization. And then we have individual goals, and these are I pulled in Mackey's goals and the weightings that were part of those. And so Mackey has a goal around managing the budget. I think we all do, in terms of maximizing receipt of funds from the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund and managing human resources. That's goal 6. We have other areas of import, which is support for regulatory, overall process improvements, data reporting. And then finally, on goal number 8, we have just the overall societal and environmental impact as a goal. Questions or thoughts on this?
One more adder, just in terms of the individual business competencies at the top, you can see that there are 8 there. I think 5 of them, the first 5, are relative to all staff. So all staff will get those. Then the managerial competencies, the 3, will go to the senior team. You can see that there's actually a new one we added. Eric and his team have been leading a Be Ready, a diversity, equity, and inclusion process within the organization. And one of the things that's coming up is that we've added here is the notion of belonging. So this 8th item in that row is new. We want to create a culture of belonging for everyone. So for example, when somebody says something like, you guys, and they're actually talking to people who have women in the group, that some people may not take that, they may take it in a certain way. So we're trying to create a more culture of inclusivity and just being respectful of all of these things that could cut people and just be wearing over time. So we want our senior team to be aware of this, be conscious of it. People will score based on the culture of belonging that we're creating. So we added that, and you can see it's a high priority in terms of its weight. So folks will be focused on it.
Other thoughts or points for consideration here?
Well, my comment on what Brian just said is it's clear we're not Florida. But I was wondering, just overall, how are you doing with retention of people? I heard that Eversource really pays like really well. I don't know if that's true, but I mean, are we losing people to other places, or?
I haven't actually run a retention rate recently. I'll take a look at that. We have not seen huge exodus in staff. Our staff are dedicated to the mission for the most part, and I think that means a lot. That doesn't mean that we should try to compensate them in an externally equitable or an externally competitive way. Because I don't want to lose people, but I think we're in a pretty good situation. I think with us, part of this whole transparent merit is there are 2 aspects of it. One, in the budget I presented you guys with the COLA comes from Bureau of Labor Statistics. The COLA is lower than the inflation rate, but it's enough that we're headed directionally in line with where the market is, but so there is some incentive there. People need to earn their merit to stay ahead of inflation. That said, it's competitive, and we really want to incentivize great performance here. And as we're allowing people or proposing to allow people to earn up to 8%, I think there really is an opportunity for people to say, hey, if I'm able to get X, Y, and Z across the finish line, I have a really good shot at increasing my pay, and that's worth it to me, and that's what's going to make me not go to Eversource or not go to wherever they may be thinking of.
Well, I think that the the feeling of a dedication to the mission is a remarkable aspect of the Green Bank. That and I think that the senior leadership really you all deserve like really great credit for doing that, and I really appreciate that. When people like I come out of a union environment, and like that's like all like people are doing it because they believe in it, and I like the idea that the Green Bank has got a similar kind of vibe to it.
I was gonna say our vision statement of planet protected by the love of humanity says it all. But yeah, agree,
Yeah.
Jeff.
And also, it's not just a job; it's an adventure.
Oh, in many ways.
I was going to ask a practical question. It's a fairly complex document. So who all is filling all this out, and how many hours do you need to dedicate to each one?
Well,
Yeah.
there are actually 3 more positions I forgot to mention in the staffing. No, kidding. We, as has been my goal since I started here, try to automate all of our data in any way, shape, or form. And so for the top 2 sections, these are all coming from internal Green Bank systems. We can easily pull that, and it's not a significant lift for us to do that. The bottom portion, or the portion on business competencies that really comes out of the 360 review, we can pull that directly out of our annual performance review platform. So that's not a huge lift. And then the individual goals, that's going to need to be scored by managers. And again, that'll be done in the performance review system. So yeah, this will take like a one-time couple hours setting up the Excel document to feed off of everything else, but it's not an administrative burden. Okay. So with that, I think that's all I had on the agenda for today. If there are other questions or concerns, I'd be glad to discuss.
I just think the Green Bank continues to demonstrate what I was just talking about, which is just a dedication to the mission of cutting carbon and working for climate safety, and in a way that for now continues to work. There's a limit to where market forces can bring us on this stuff. I think eventually it'll be more like the kind of command economy that World War II represented. But for right now, we're really it's just so sophisticated and innovative, and I really appreciate the work that you all are doing.
Well, thank you for help steering us on the right path. With that, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved. I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed?
Aye.
If you're
Great.
you're welcome to stay here, but you'll be by yourself.
What happened to belonging?
That's funny.
I did want to say, Brenda, I've seen you on TV now on your television spot. And every time it comes up, I say, "Hey, I know her."
I know that lady.
Yeah, that's right. They're good spots.
Yeah, they are. They're great.
Yeah.
We'll have to send her a note.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, folks, and we'll see you at the next thing.
Okay.
Good
All right.
week.
Take care.
Okay. Bye, everybody.
Bye bye.
Thanks all.